For the Hansard record, can I get you each to state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today? We want to start it.
Rear Admiral Brett Saunders, the Commander of Joint Agency Task Force Operations Sovereign Borders.
Claire Sharp, Head of Immigration.
Michael Thomas, Deputy Secretary, Immigration Compliance.
Ben Biddington, First Assistant Secretary, Offshore Programs and International Cooperation.
Fantastic. And do you have an opening statement today?
No, we don't, Senator.
Fantastic. We might jump straight into questions. Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your attendance today. Is the department involved in the current court case in PNG over $11 million in unpaid accommodation costs to refugees at Lodge 10? Are you involved in that case?
Senator, not to my knowledge.
All right. There are proceedings to join the Australian government to the court case brought by refugees. The PNG government, in a defence, has said that it's the Australian government's responsibility to provide accommodation support and costs for refugees at Lodge 10. Have you been engaging with the PNG government that have been making these claims in the court case, saying it's the Australian government's responsibility? Has there been any response or engagement with PNG?
Senator, we do work closely with the Papua New Guinean government, consistent with the arrangement that we entered into some years ago. I might let Ms Jones talk to the way we engage and if she has the specifics about that case.
Yes, thank you. Doris Jones, Assistant Secretary, Complex Case Management and Support Programs. We work with the PNG government, specifically the Immigration and Citizenship Services Authority, providing capacity building support for them to resolve the residual former regional processing caseload in PNG. The matter that you ask about, I note, was reported in the ABC News, I believe, last week. The Australian High Commission has received legal representation from the accommodation provider in relation to outstanding accommodation fees. They do not relate to the Australian government, and that is a matter for the PNG government.
Well, you say there's you have an ongoing relationship with PNG's migration. I assume that would include the Chief Migration Officer and the other officers inside the PNG department?
Yes.
Have you raised with the PNG, your PNG colleagues, the reporting that PNG's then Chief Migration Officer received some $10,000 in kickbacks from Mei Lin, who's currently facing drug smuggling charges in Australia? Has that been part of any of the discussion with PNG?
Not an issue that we've discussed with PNG government.
Well, you don't think it's an issue when there are allegations that senior officials inside the PNG Migration Department are receiving kickbacks from somebody who is travelling to Australia and doing drug runs to Australia? Those sort of corruption concerns, you don't raise them with PNG?
That's not an issue subject to the work that we're doing with PNG.
Well, Moses Maladina, the former Deputy Prime Minister of PNG, received a significant amount of money from offshore resettlement contracts that were with PNG. Are you aware that the company, I think it's Chatswood PNG Humanitarian Program Limited, received money from the Australian government for offshore resettlement? Are you aware of those flows of money?
Did not receive any money from the Australian government.
Oh, okay. Did it receive money that was sourced from the Australian government, went through the PNG government?
That may be the case.
Mm-hmm. You're aware that Maladina ran the PNG humanitarian program with Mei Lin and hired her for a senior role in that Chatswood company with Australian money? Are you aware of that?
Those arrangements were a matter for the PNG government.
Well, even though it impacts on Australia, because May Lin is now in court facing criminal charges for drug smuggling into Australia, flying drugs into Australia. It's a matter for the PNG government whether or not the former Deputy Prime Minister contracts with someone like that using Australian money. You say that's a matter for the PNG government? It's Australian money.
Australian government didn't have anything to do with any of those contracts. That was the PNG government that was identifying those contractors and engaging those contractors.
With Australian money. You know, there are nurses out there paying tax, and your department is giving that money to PNG, who's then giving it to a company that has the former Deputy Prime Minister on it and a now prosecuted drug runner on it. I don't think Australian nurses and teachers appreciate you giving our money for those purposes. But you say it's not a matter for... You don't look at it once you hand the money over in a big chunk to PNG, it's just a matter for the PNG, is it?
Senator, I think Ms Jones has answered the question you asked a couple of times. I don't think there's anything further we can add to this.
Well, PNG did a forensic audit into some of these payments, including the payments involving Moses Maladina, the payments going to Chatswood PNG. They've done a forensic audit of where the money that was sourced in Australia has gone to. Have you sought access to PNG's forensic audit? It's Australian money. Have you sought access to PNG's forensic audit?
Point of order, Chair. So the Senator let the officials answer the question instead of constantly interrupting.
Certainly.
I should rule on that.
Just for the record, there was no interruption. So I'll ask again. The PNG government have done a forensic audit, including into payments from money that was sourced from Australia that went to Chatswood PNG, a company associated with the former Deputy Prime Minister of PNG, Moses Maladina, and May Lin, who's now in Australia facing drug smuggling charges. The PNG government have done the forensic audit about where the Australian money has gone. Have you sought access to that forensic audit by the PNG government?
Senator, I think we'll need to take this on notice because I don't know the answer to that.
And I have not seen the report.
So we'll take on notice whether we've sought access.
Ms Jones, you haven't seen the report. You're the person who's been responsible for the dealings with the department. You said it at the beginning. That's your job. Have you requested that forensic audit?
I have not.
Why not?
It's a matter for PNG to determine the spending of the money in relation to the humanitarian program.
Even if it's Australian money? Is that right? Even if it's Australian money?
I've answered the question.
Turning to Nauru, will you provide a copy to this committee of the MOU that the Australian government has signed with Nauru, under which $2.5 billion of public money is now going to be provided to Nauru over the coming decades for the NZYQ cohort? Will you provide that MOU?
Senator, we can take that on notice and seek to provide that to the committee.
You've previously refused to provide that MOU when it's been requested by the Senate and when it's been requested by other parliamentary committees. Can you remember why you've refused to provide it?
Senator, I believe the Minister for Home Affairs made a public interest immunity claim, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was based on the sensitivity of the arrangement at that point in time. Some of that sensitivity may have fallen away with some ongoing litigation, though. So, as I said, I will take it on notice and seek to provide it to the committee.
Mm-hmm. We heard earlier that IHMS has contracts with a company called Igigu Solutions, and I apologise for my pronunciation, it's EGIGU. Were you aware of IHMS using Australian money to contract with Igigu Solutions?
Senator, we do, as you've heard in previous estimates hearings and from both IHMS and MTC, have an arrangement whereby we do know about any major subcontracts that are used. So, yes, I believe we did know about that relationship.
Thomas or Mr Biddington, were you aware of that contract?
Senator, I think the IHMS folk characterised it not as a formal subcontract, but a third-party arrangement.
Sorry, a party arrangement?
A third-party arrangement, I think, was the terminology they used. But I'll see if Mr Manwaring can confirm that.
Senator Peter Manwaring, Senior Director, Offshore Programs Enabling Branch. Yes, Senator, we were aware that IHMS engaged Agigu Solutions Corporation as a supplier for vehicle hire.
And did you do due diligence? Did you look at it? Did you approve that?
Senator, the threshold for the IHMS contract in terms of major subcontractors is actually higher than that for the MTC contract. So it's $1 million per financial year. There are no contracts under the IHMS arrangement that meet that threshold.
So if they organise a series of contracts under $1 million, they don't have to. You don't review it. You don't oversight it.
We obviously still review any sort of invoicing arrangements to ensure that they are actually fit for purpose and they meet the relevant PGPA requirements.
What's the value of the Agigu contract?
Senator, I'll need to take that on notice. I don't have that detail here.
Well, you see, Agigu Solutions is a fully state-owned Nauru corporation, isn't it? And the current minister responsible for it is President Adiang. That's right, isn't it?
Senator, I'm aware that Agigu Solutions Corporation is a state-owned enterprise of the Government of Nauru. That's correct.
And the current chair is the President's brother. And a director is David Angjamia, the brother of Lionel, the former president. That's the current makeup of Agigu Solutions, isn't it?
Senator, I don't have that detail with me. I'll need to take it on notice.
All right. So how much Australian government money is going to a corporation that's literally in the pocket of the Nauruan president and his brother and the former administration? How much Australian money is going to that corporation? And did you say you haven't done a due diligence on it? You just let that roll?
Senator, as I stated earlier, the due diligence there's a due diligence process primarily around major subcontractors. The threshold for a major subcontractor under the IHMS arrangement is $1 million. So the due diligence process that is talked about in our submission, etc., in relation to IHMS is only required for subcontracts that reach that threshold, and no contracts or arrangements reach that threshold for the IHMS arrangement.
So IHMS could be signing contract after contract after contract with companies that are owned or controlled or benefiting Lionel Angjamia, the current President Adiang, could be signing contract after contract, and you don't check. You don't do any due diligence. Australian taxpayers' money just rolling out and you don't do any due diligence. It's a very convenient threshold, isn't it? So you don't have to look. Is that why it was set at $1 million? So there's less corruption, you see?
No, Senator, I don't believe that that's the case.
Well, why is there a different threshold for IHMS than there is for MTC? What's the threshold for MTC?
The threshold for MTC is $50,000 per financial year.
So why $50,000 for MTC, where obviously Australian taxpayers would want to see, particularly in a corruption-prone environment like Richardson points out in Nauru, checks? Why $50,000 for MTC but $1 million for IHMS? Why is that?
Senator, I don't have that detail with me. I'll need to take it on notice.
See, I'm led to the conclusion it's so that you don't see the corruption, so that the money can flow corruptly and you don't even get to have to look at it. Was that why it was done? That why the $1 million threshold was put in place, so you don't see the corruption?
Senator Mr.
Sorry, Chair. Point of order. I feel like that's an incredible accusation to make towards public officials who are giving evidence here this afternoon, and I'd ask the Senator to withdraw it.
All right, I'll withdraw. I'll move on. Has the department been made aware of corruption allegations relating to David Angomia and David Adiang? Have you been made aware of corruption negotiations involving one or both of those individuals?
Just clarification, so did you say corruption negotiations?
Corruption allegations.
Senator, there's been a range of, obviously, media reporting and other information that you're probably referring to. We are aware of information that's in the public domain about allegations and accusations.
Are you aware of other reports that may have happened internally? Have there been internal concerns raised with you about corruption allegations involving one or either of those two?
Senator, what do you mean by internal?
People within Home Affairs. Have they raised concerns about corruption involving one or either of those two?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator, but I'll take that on notice.
We heard from MTC earlier today that they're providing funding to LRC car rentals. There have been now nearly 5 years of corruption allegations, including involving payments through LRC car rentals. You signed off on the contract with, was it Chazak? The parent company of LRC car rentals. When you signed off on that contract for MTC, did you investigate the allegations of corruption involving LRC car rentals, a wholly owned subsidiary of Chazak?
Just to clarify, Senator, I think MTC Australia gave evidence that they have a subcontract with Chazak, not LRC car rentals.
Correct.
Noting your comments around structure, but I'll...
So Chazak parent company, LRC car rentals, corrupt as all get out. MTC enter into a contract with Chazak. Did you undertake a due diligence about the corruption allegations involving LRC car rentals, a wholly owned subsidiary of Chazak, when you agreed to the $750,000 contract with Chazak?
So, Senator, it might be useful to step through the process by which...
More useful if you just answer my question, given the shortness of time. Did you undertake a corruption investigation? Did you review the corruption allegations involving LRC car rentals when you signed off on the $750,000 contract with Chazak?
The department undertook its due diligence process.
Did that involve investigating the corruption allegations?
It involved looking at conflict of interest declaration and the risk assessment associated with Chazak.
But we heard from MTC that the conflict of interest declarations are just signed by Nauruan officials and aren't separately checked by MTC. My guess is, if you just looked at the conflict of interest declarations, it'll all be sweet. Did you go behind the conflict of interest? Did you look at the reality? Did you investigate the corruption?
So, Senator, the department does its own due diligence in relation to both the risk assessments and the conflict of interest declarations. So the department undertakes its own independent checking in relation to those matters.
Did you investigate the corruption allegations? Simple question.
Senator, I'd have to go back and look at the specific paperwork in relation to that matter to understand the precise nature of the investigations at the time.
We've had multiple submissions identifying systemic corruption on the ground in Nauru. They've come from across the spectrum. I'll give you one submission that's actually come from somebody who the Australian government has sent to Nauru against their will. Submission 12 from the ASRC, if you want. There's a lot of corruption here. I know this because there are a lot of funds that are sent from Australia to Nauru, but where does the money go? We only get $520 a month. We don't get proper services. The Nauru government is siphoning off that money. They're right, aren't they? Billions and billions of dollars going. And we hear from people who are on the ground in Nauru that they're hungry. They don't get medical services, that there's no transport. Where are the billions going? If not to give someone adequate food, where are the billions going?
Senator, I'm just wondering about the best way to answer your question. Would you like us to take
Why
you
are people
through...
hungry on Nauru when the Australian government has paid $15 billion for this project over the last 15 years? Why are the people we send there hungry?
Senator, would you like us to take you through the system for setting the allowance for food?
Explain to me why they're hungry.
Senator, individuals who are transferred to Nauru after they've spent the initial period in the RPC are then moved into community accommodation. While they're in community accommodation, they receive an allowance paid by the Australian government. That is set by reference to looking at the cost of food in Nauru, and we can talk in detail about how we calculate that if that's of use.
Rather than talk in detail about it, if you could provide that on notice, when we hear it's $20 or more for 2 litres of milk, when we hear it's like $15 for a kilo of rice,
Senator,
when these people are being provided $520 a month.
Senator, it is correct that fresh milk is expensive on Nauru. UHT milk is available for $3 to $4 a litre. That's by way of an example. There's a lot of different examples. I think it would be better if we could take you through the detail on how we set it and the reference points we use to set the allowance, which we will do on notice. I'd
invite you to do that on notice because it sounds like it'll be quite time intensive, but I'd invite you to do that on notice, and I'd appreciate you providing that on notice. We've had multiple submissions from people who say they're seeking urgent health care from IHMS. They get given Panadol or they get given sleeping pills. Have any of these complaints found their way to the Department of Home Affairs? Have you investigated these complaints involving IHMS for inadequate care?
Senator, we do have a complaints management system that's there for both people. There's one system that's for people who are in the RPC and another for those who are in community accommodation. And there is a method by which those people can make complaints. They are sifted and go to the appropriate provider. And in all cases, whether it's a complaint relating to relating to MTC or IHMS, or if it's relating to a service provided through the Government of Nauru, the department has officers on the island who meet regularly with all three of those to identify what complaints have been made and understand the actions being taken.
But not to go out and meet with the people that we've sent there, but to meet with these entities on there who are screening the complaints. Is that right?
To my knowledge, the Home Affairs officers don't go and meet with complainants directly.
Why not? Is that because you might hear complaints?
Ms Struggle might be able to provide more detail about that.
Senator Shan Strugnell, Assistant Secretary, Offshore Programs, Operations and Strategy Branch. So we have a team on Nauru, the Nauru support team, which I know you're aware of, Senator. For individuals that are in the community, there's a 3-stage process for complaints. They can, in the first instance, place the complaint in a complaints box at their accommodation site. Alternatively, if it's a serious complaint, such as the ones that you raised earlier, they can put that directly through to the police, or they can use Igugu Solutions Corporation, ESC, which is contracted to the Department of Multicultural Affairs, to advocate on their behalf and support them to file a police report. That information is then escalated in the 3rd stage through to our NST officers, our Nauru support team that I mentioned, representing the department, and then that is raised through our bilateral mechanisms. Through the bilateral mechanisms with the Department of Multicultural Affairs, we seek an understanding of where the complaint is up to and what we can do to support the resolution of that complaint.
Now, Igugu Solutions Corporation is also owned by the Nauruan government.
That's correct, Senator.
Is also controlled by people associated with the President.
That's correct.
Do you understand why people on Nauru who are fearful of retribution may be incredibly anxious about putting their complaints through a company wholly owned by the Nauruan government and controlled by the political players in charge of the Nauru? Do you understand why they might be anxious about going through that process?
I can see your point, Senator, but there are options that they can use for that. that are not just Igugu solutions, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Sharp, I was reviewing the number of public interest immunity secrecy claims your government has made over just the last year involving Nauru. A PIA claim over the voluntary return policy, a PIA claim over how much was spent on an assisted voluntary return, PIA claim over which countries people were sent to under voluntary return, PIA claim under quantitative information relating to Nauru and long-term stay visas, one over information on support vessels, one over information on which countries the Department of Home Affairs is negotiating possible resettlement arrangements with, one over the contract outlining details of the services that MTC is required to provide, one over the Memorandum of Understanding on Mutual Cooperation, one over the Memorandum of Understanding between the Republic of Nauru in relation to the ongoing presence of people on Nauru, one over any information on the potential for third country reception arrangements with Papua New Guinea, one over the correspondence from the United States regarding its executive order about realigning the United States refugee admissions program, one over the funding arrangements supporting Papua New Guinea's independent management of the residual regional processing caseload, and one over any information on current negotiations between the Government of Nauru and the Australian Government in relation to the resettlement of non-citizens just in the last 12 months. How is it that your department has advised the Minister to put that cloak of secrecy, that entire cloak of secrecy, over all of these critical aspects of the offshore settlement arrangement? Why does the department support this kind of secrecy?
Senator, you're right to point out it's the Minister for Home Affairs who makes the public interest immunity claim.
On your advice.
Each one is supported by the reasons that he considers that it is in the public interest not to disclose that information. Most commonly, and you did raise a number of them, most commonly...
13.
Yeah, therefore, either because they're concerning a very active negotiation with a foreign government where we consider that sharing the information at that stage of the negotiations could, for example, damage the outcome in the negotiations. It could be for operational sensitivity associated with the actual conduct of Operation Sovereign Borders. I would need to go back and re-articulate the reasons that are in each one.
Will you see what it does produce is this cloak of secrecy. And I can tell you what we're getting in this inquiry and what we're increasingly getting through brave whistleblowers is that this cloak of secrecy is covering up an inherently corrupt arrangement where organised cruelty, intentional organised cruelty, can only be done through corrupt arrangements, as we're seeing on Nauru. That's probably the accurate summary of what's happening here, isn't it? A cloak of secrecy, because that's the only way you can prevent the Australian public seeing that intentional organised cruelty involves corruption. That's the truth of it, isn't it?
No, Senator, I don't agree with your characterisation.
Authorised by J. McCall, Australian Greens, Canberra.